like the opening of all of this, and it's called True Story, and I wrote it when I hadn't been writing for ages, and it kind of trickled through, and then everything else came through, and it was a poem about childhood, True Story, because it's true, and it's a story. It's not that Dad doesn't love you or your brother, said Mum, greasing up her ashy legs with Vaseline. Or that your Auntie Amy's a man-stealing, cheating, backstabbing bitch who can't keep a man so she has to steal somebody else's. He and I just don't see eye to eye anymore, that's all. And he wouldn't stop eating cashew nuts in bed. It's not that your mum and I can't stand each other, said Dad, pushing a dirty £10 note into my chino's pocket, or that I forgot about your birthday. But I need time to think. I'm moving in with Amy. And anyway, your mum cooks with too much salt. It wasn't so much an affair, you understand, said Auntie Amy, lacing up my brother's small Nike trainers and picking out my knots with the wooden comb shaped like a fist. But a meeting of minds, outside of our respective vows. And bodies, muttered Mum when I told her later, two-faced tramp. What a joke. Don't tell anyone I said that. Don't tell anyone I said that. It's not as though your mum's exactly an angel anyway, said Dad, with blood-red eyes and a pulsing vein in his forehead, finishing the last of the whiskey. And Auntie Amy said, easy, Winston, you've had a lot. And Dad said, don't tell me what to do. Not even my wife yet, and you think you know it all. Yeah, you think you know it all. It's not that your family are going to hell necessarily, said Grandma, boiling up the green banana, yam and dumpling and grating up the coconut onto the rice and peas. They must just accept Jesus Christ into their lives and put away the drink and sin and all the lies. Now go and wash your hands and set the table. Don't worry, go. We'll pray for them tonight. So the next poem it's called Not the End of the World, but Almost. And it was... Oh, thank you. Yeah, I should stop doing that, I should pause. It's called Not the End of the World, but Almost, and it was written at a time when I was really kind of depressed and down, and I met someone and how things shifted a little bit. The day was not the best, especially in my head. I was thinking calmly about stepping up the side of the mountain in the rain, arms outstretched, embracing this life, this empty space one last time and making it look like an accident. That's when I saw you. Eyes did meet, lightning did not flash, but I thought, who wears a reindeer jersey and red shorts in May? And anyway, you looked kind, and the sun was peeping out a bit, and the sky was still dark, and it was still drizzling, but everyone needs a little kindness. You have a smile that turns down at the sides, and those gentle kind of eyes, those gentle kind of eyes. We sat in a hill in the car, looking at where the beach met the sea and the rain hit them both, and I, quite desperately, quite selfishly said, drive into the sea with me just once and it's done. But instead, you drove fast to the opposite direction, to a blessed place of broken brick and stone, and said, this used to be my childhood house, and then drove further, on further to a purple house, way up on the hillside, and said, hey, one day this will be home. It wasn't perfect, and it isn't now. And I still have days when I want to exit the system faster than you can say, don't you dare give up now. And you still have days when you can't even taste the sweetness in raw honey, and neither one of us believes in pills. Days when I so want to kiss you, but my mouth is sour, and your thoughts are bitter, and I'm angry, just mad, just crazy with it all. But we are each other's home, sweet home, love. The roof of our purple house is screwed on too tight at times, and the walls can pinch a little. But my God, they're always warm. Thanks. And then the last one is a poem about poetry, and it's also a poem about coming out. Nobody is saying anything at the dinner table tonight because everyone is too angry. The only noise is the sound of fine silver on bone china and other people's children playing outside. But this will give you poetry. There is no knife in the kitchen sharp enough to cut the tension, and your grandmother's hands are shaking. The meat and yam stick in your throat, and you do not dare even to whisper, please pass the salt. But this will give you poetry. Your father is breathing out of his mouth. He is set to beat the sparkle out of you tonight for reasons he isn't even sure of himself yet. You will come away sore and with an aching heart, but this will give you poetry. The bruising will shatter into black and blue diamonds that you will use to make your smile bright and your eyes shine. No one will sit beside you in class. You will find a twin heart like yours, scarred a little, and maybe it will work. Most likely it won't the first time, but that will give you poetry. Broken trust will crumble into gold dust, and maybe, just maybe, you can grow from this, and this will open the door. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that, Yrsa. It was beautiful. Can we just give her another round of applause? One of the things that I think is so important in art is the courage to break silence, the courage to tell your story in whatever shape or form that is. One of the things that was really important for us in the Body Narratives was about creating that space, and we've had the real privilege of working with two phenomenal artists, Indigo Williams and Lesley Asare, and we commissioned them to put together a series of workshops and work with 6 girls to put together an installation for the exhibition, and that was all about breaking that silence, about being bold and brave, and I really want them to share their story about that journey because it's been something that's been really touching, and I hope at the end of the night you have a chance to view the work and listen. So yeah, I'm going to welcome Indigo and Lesley onto the stage.
Hello, hello, hello everybody. You guys doing good? Yeah. You sure? If you're sure, say yeah. 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 Louder. Yeah. Oh, there we go. Awesome. So I'm going to throw it to Lesley. So we've decided we're going to pose each other questions to help us prompt the right answers out of us.
And to make sure we share everything with you, because there's a lot, but we won't keep you.
Yeah. So the first question, Lesley, is who are we and what do we do?
Okay, so we are I-Shape Beauty, as Hannah said. I am Lesley Asare, and this is Indigo Williams. I am a visual artist, and Indigo is a poet. And I-Shape Beauty was created and inspired by our friendship. And through I-Shape Beauty, we want to create artistic projects and workshops to empower women. So that's basically what we do in I-Shape Beauty.
Okay, how did the project come about?
Okay. So as Hannah mentioned, we were commissioned by the Body Narratives to create a project for the exhibition. And I think when we were thinking about what we can create, we really reflected on our personal experiences as women of colour. And we realised that we've grown up in predominantly white institutions. And I don't know if any of you have seen one of the promo videos for our project, but I explained how I grew up in white schools and things like that, and Indigo has also grown up, and because of her practice, her artistic practice, she's also been involved in white institutions. So we started to think about how our experiences in those institutions have kind of silenced us in certain ways. Like, we haven't been able to outwardly speak about blackness or explore what it means to be a black woman of colour. And this opportunity to create something for the Body Narratives really caused us to dig deep within ourselves and address the things that we hadn't had the space to do so before. And I think it just, we just really wanted to create that space for other women, because this amazing project created that space for us. We wanted to create a space for other women to do the same. Am I missing anything?
Not missing anything at all.
Okay.
So I'll jump in right there. So one of the other things that came about, we had to ask ourselves in developing the project is, how do we use art as a tool for healing? Mm-hmm. And I know for me personally, I have found that in my practice as a poet, I've discovered that art demands for you to pay attention. It requires you to be sensitive. It requires you to be awake. You cannot be an artist if you are not awake to your surroundings, if you are not awake to yourself. And it forces you to tell the truth, to be honest about how you feel, to be honest about your emotions. And I think this is what makes arts the most perfect tool for healing, for reconciling yourself, because I think that we live in a world, I said this to Lesley earlier, that we live in a world where there are so many images and so many lies that are told that we should believe. And I think that truth is by far the most secure thing in this world. And I think that when you are grounded in truth, that's where security comes from. And if you live in a world that's constantly encouraging you to lie and to try to find solutions from everything outside instead of inside, in sitting in yourself and asking yourself, why do I feel that way? Or where has this pain come from? Or how do I now express this pain? And how can I have the freedom to express this pain? Because when it comes to talking about pain, people don't really like to listen to it. People don't want to hear it. People ask you, how are you? But they don't really mean, how are you? In fact, Leslie's got a new way of asking that. What is it that you say?
I say, how are you feeling? Because I think that's a bit more specific. It gets to the root and you can elaborate about how you're feeling. How are you is such a throwaway thing that we say in general, everyday conversation. But when we're asking each other, how are we feeling? I can tell you how I'm feeling. I'm feeling elevated. I'm feeling down, and I'm feeling down because, or I'm feeling elevated because. And it really gets to the crux of our emotions, I think.
And yeah, definitely. And I think that consciousness, if art then cultivates consciousness, I think consciousness, it kind of carves the way for a level of responsibility, because you can't unknow what you know. Once you know something, you are then responsible for what you do with that knowledge. If you are aware of where a pain comes from, or that you feel this pain, you now have a choice. You now have the power of agency. What are you going to do with this pain? Are you going to allow it to make you bitter or better? How are you now going to express that? And what we did with the girls is we told them, like my workshop specifically was called The Power of Telling, because I believe that in art, a lot of the best poems I've found comes from the truth. It comes from the stories you don't want to tell. It comes from your pain. Your pain is your power. Your pain is the thing that shines you. It forces the higher you to come out. And you have a choice, though, to be the higher you, to rise to the challenge or rise to your power and make something of it, or to allow that thing to have power over you. But the fundamental thing, though, is that we really wanted to get across with these workshops is that ultimately you have the power. Everything that tells you that you don't is an illusion. It is a lie. And within the spaces of growing up within spaces where we are censored and we're not allowed to fully express our experiences as women of color, or that we've had moments of trauma, or that someone telling us, there's all kinds of things that have come out. You can just read, I'm not even going to go into it, that's another talk in itself. But how do you then deal with that? How do you own your space in a world that tells you you don't have a right to it, in a world that tells you you do not have a right to your own story? And the beauty of art is that in a world that denies you of space, art allows you to create space. You are the creator of spaces. We have created a space today. When you paint, you are creating space. You are a creator. You're constantly making. And when you write poem, you are creating space. Our slogan is to reclaim, define, and own. So by being conscious, you're reclaiming the things that have happened to you. You're reclaiming the parts of you that have been taken. And when you tell it, you're defining. You're saying, this is who I am. This is my truth. You're defining it. And when you own it, and you're standing in front of people you've never met, and you're saying, this is who I am, and I'm not ashamed of it, that is power. That is power, and that's how you own who you are, by daily practicing those things, daily being honest with yourself. How do I feel? Why do I feel that way? And I think that's where healing really comes from, honesty. Yeah.
So I briefly just wanted to take you through the installation and how it came about. So as Indigo mentioned, she took the girls through a session called The Power of Telling. And in that session, we worked with them through using objects. Each girl brought in an object that symbolized their story or their secret, the secret that they've kept and that they wanted to release and share. That's how the poetry session began, and then it went on to Indigo gave them poetry prompts to kind of get them in the frame of mind to articulate their stories in a poetic form. And following that, we created their poems. A period of 15 months where I truly looked at myself. It was the most uncomfortable 15 months of my life so far. And I did it because I realized that I didn't inhabit my body. I kind of just floated around and I adopted everything that everyone said about my body. I've always been a big girl, but I didn't own it, and I wanted to own it. I wanted to own it so women of all shapes and sizes could learn that no matter how tall you are, how slim you are, how wide or short, whatever it is, own who you are. That's why I wanted to do my project, and I created my project. But in the process of learning skills in costume design and creating this performance piece, which I can tell you about later, I gained such an appreciation for all these different body shapes and sizes. And I actually went to Ghana to speak, because I'm from Ghana, but I was born here. And I got to visit my aunties and my grandparents. And I spoke to them and asked them questions about their relationship to their bodies. And something that stuck with me is that women in Ghana, or they grew up having their clothes tailor-made to fit them. And that was just an amazing thing for me to wrap my head around, because I started thinking about the psychology of clothes and how they didn't grow up going into H&M, squeezing into a size 16, then walking over to Zara thinking, oh yeah, I'm a size 16, but then you're actually not because the sizes are different. So I was just thinking, how does that change how you feel about yourself if you've always had things to flatter your body? You're always feeling fabulous because everything fits you. And I was just thinking, I love that. And when I came back, I wanted to create a mannequin for myself. So I've done this process for myself a number of times. And I realized it was like a really shocking thing. I was like, God, is that how much space you take up, Lesley? But at the same time, I was like, that's how much space I take up, Lesley, you know? Like, so I wanted to create something that allows these women to see the spaces that they take up in the world. And that's through one-to-one sessions, I created these body sculptures with them. So you'll see their poems as well as their body sculptures, and the objects around the installation are objects that symbolize their stories, their experiences, and who they are at this point in time. And lastly, I just want to say one more thing. The TV is really central to the installation as it's placed in the center, because we wanted these women to represent women of color on TV. There was such a lack of representation in the media, and we remember the first time that we burnt the DVD and we put it on the TV, we were so excited because it just said so much, and we just thought it was so powerful to see their faces telling their stories in their own words on a TV screen. So that's our installation for you. Indigo's got a few.
I want to get you all to say some words after me. So say, I reclaim. You say it like you really do reclaim. One more time. I reclaim. I define. And I own who I am. Enjoy the rest of the talk, ladies. Thank you.
We're going to move on to the main part of the event now, which is going to be a panel discussion. So I'd like to invite the wonderful ladies and artists, Aowen Jin, Vicki Igbokwe, Sharmila Chauhan, and where is Bola? She's there. Bola Agbaje. Come and join us. While we're just setting up, I just want to let you know the kind of format. So it's a panel discussion, but we want to make this as open as possible. So I'm going to pose a few questions to them that I want to know about their experiences, their stories, the work that they're doing, and then we'll open it up to you guys. So we hope that we can have a conversation here. You can ask questions, you can interrogate them about what they do and all the incredible knowledge that they have. So yes, we do have 2 mics, so you guys are going to have to pass it along. But I'm going to invite you all each to talk about introduce yourself, introduce the work that you do, and what you're doing right now. So, Sharmila, do you want to start?
I guess I'm going first. I should have gone to that side. I'm Sharmila, and I'm a playwright and prose writer. Thank you so much, Hannah, for inviting me. I've been really inspired and touched really emotionally by everyone that's come before us. So I guess the title of the exhibition and the whole thing, A Different Mirror, started to make me think about what a different mirror is for a woman of colour. And I started to think about the fact that we think of mirrors as objects that we might use to verify how we look or to admire how we look. But when you think about a woman of colour, it's a little bit more complex than that, and we might use a mirror also to assess, appease, and kind of try and see how we might fit into a kind of mainstream culture that we live in. And personally, I've spent a lot of time trying to think about the way I look and the way I present myself, punishing women for being sexual and punishing women for being, I guess, beautiful and, in a sense, holding the key to society. And a lot of my work explores that whole idea of how in India we've lost our connection to the goddess and Devi worship, which is kind of the foundation of which Asian culture really existed, which was the multitude of assets that a woman has now been diminished and we've forgotten. So in many parts of India we used to have yogini temples, which are temples where women were celebrated and venerated, and actually now it's become completely patriarchal, and we've lost all connection to what would have been made a real strong foundation for society. So I wrote a play recently called The Husbands, which is set in a matriarchal community, going back to old values that still exist in parts of India. And in this community, Shaktipur, not only are women heads of households and political leaders, they also have more than one husband, which is a consequence of female genocide, which occurs in many parts of India. So I, the main character, is the leader of this community, and she has 2 husbands and another on the way. And I was really surprised at how controversial that idea was for people. Even when we were casting the male actors, actors would actually say, I have a real trouble with this, no man would ever accept this. And I just was like, really? Like, we accept, if it was the other way around, we would have no trouble getting women to play sister wives and so on, to each other. And also when we cast Aya, who is supposed to be a sensual, powerful woman, we not only had trouble trying to find an actress who could take that lead, because in England it's very hard to find an Asian woman lead in that kind of very strong, powerful role, but also the woman we cast was an older woman in her 40s with short hair, and a number of women came up to me after and were like, I was so moved and it was amazing, but actually, why did you cast an Indian woman with short hair? And even for myself, I struggle with that, because I see Indian women as, women with long hair. I have long hair myself, and I just thought that's ridiculous, that we actually will value a woman by the length of her hair, and also, obviously, the colour of how dark her skin is. And all the Asian actresses, my husband was looking at all the kind of spotlight photos, and he was like, but they're all so white. And I was like, yeah, they are. It's really hard to find an Indian actress, especially, in India and the UK, who has a proper tone to it. I don't mean it like that, that sounds really wrong. I mean a diversity of shade, because we are of a multitude of colours. And so it was really interesting, and we got a review in The Spectator, which was so awful. Someone said, this should have been, he said that she was sex craved. And I was like, really? A woman, because she has 2 husbands, is sex craved? That's how we value women, that's how we see women. If it was a man, you wouldn't even think that. He had a lot of very interesting comments to say about the play, and if you have time to see the review, it shocked me that there's still men with that viewpoint still exist today. I just was totally shocked. So I just quickly to say about using art as a space. For me, when I write, it is a free space. It's a free fall. I can imagine anything I like. I can find a way to express how I feel as a woman with honesty. And I think by being able to do that, I'm then hopefully able to empower and inspire other women to maybe see things that they perhaps would not see for themselves. But I think whether you use art to create something publicly or for yourself, I often just write for myself just to clear my mind or to get something off my chest when I'm feeling really stressed. It is the only way to find clarity and to find freedom, I think, real freedom. So, yeah.
Hi, my name is Vicki Igbokwe and I'm the creative director and choreographer for Uchenna Dance. Uchenna is my Nigerian name, it means God's will, and it was really important for me to name the company and give it my name, but my Nigerian name in terms of culture. In terms of work, choreographically it ranges from mass choreography, so I've worked on the opening and closing ceremonies for the Olympics. I've just come back from Russia, working out there with them, which, being a black woman in that culture, it's something actually I'm still readjusting in terms of being back in London and just seeing people and women and men of multiple races. And also work within universities, lecturing in terms of dance as well as making work for my company and touring, so working with theatres such as South Bank, Lillian Bayliss. If it was up to my mum and dad, I would have been a barrister. Nigerian parents, my dad was a lawyer, my mum was a councillor for the Labour Party, and my future had been written if it was up to the two of them. Unfortunately, my mum became really ill and I ended up becoming her full-time carer. And as most of you will know, just in terms of dance is part of the culture. You go out to the parties, family gatherings, and you're always doing that. But dance then became a real therapy for me as a 14-year-old, looking after a mum and 3 younger sisters and a household as well, because my dad had passed away. The 2-hour dance class for me is where I could be a 14-year-old, as opposed to a 14-year-old being a 54-year-old with all of that responsibility. And at the time, I had no ambition or even knew that I could make it, 1, a career, and 2, a way for me to really talk about some of the issues that affect me or that I know affect other people. And we've talked about this whole thing in terms of creating a space for dialogue and discussion, or even just to say, actually, I'm not the only one that's going through this or feeling this. And my work it's gone on a journey, and I'm only now really feeling comfortable with the work that I'm making. When I went to uni to study dance. It was contemporary dance. I knew what I was doing when I was, going into that field. And actually at the time, while I was studying, I was also part of a hip-hop company called Impact Dance, which is still going now. And looking back at it, that for me was a real anchor, because I was working with my contemporary in jazz and learning about ballet and all of these styles and forms that asked my body to do things that were not natural for its makeup. But then in the evenings, I could go and really just be free and express myself with forms and styles and music that were natural for me. But what I didn't realise that it was going to do was it was going to give me the tools and the ingredients that I would need to be the artist that I am now. So in terms of the styles that I work with, I still use contemporary dance as well as African dance, but I've also stumbled upon and fallen in love with club styles, house dance, whacking, and Vogue. When I found those styles, it was a wrap. It was like, that's it, I know what it is, I want to talk about, I have a vocabulary that excites me and makes me want to make work where I can connect with actually anybody, male or female, hair type, colour, size, it doesn't matter. But But one of the things I think for me in terms of the female agenda, in terms of talking about us as women, there is a really strong thing around image and what is beautiful. And every single person in here has something individual about them, and there is a beauty in that. And I realised actually that, you know, as I became older, that we did have issues around that. And what I found with the styles that I work with is they allowed me to just be free, whether I'm teaching a class or putting a piece of choreography together. Lesley, you said a couple of things, and I was sitting there and I was looking at Grace, because Grace will roll her eyes as soon as I start going. But your whole thing with the fabulous and the fierce and the loving yourself, that is what I'm about. Size 18, size 20, size 6, long hair, short hair. Embrace the diva in you, the goddess in you. Because if you can have that passion about yourself as a woman, it will take you to places you don't even know, whether it's about relationships, friendships, work. So we need to speak after, because I connected on another level, honestly. I had to give you those props there. So for me, in terms of, you know, in terms of art, it is about creating that space. It is about finding interesting ways to have the discussion. It is about finding different people to interact with. My work isn't just for black people, or isn't just for women, but I am a black woman, so that is going to feature in my work. You both of you also spoke about in terms of the TV screen, and, you know, not having that. As an artist, as a dance artist, I look around and I struggle sometimes to go, who are the black artists out there that are ahead of me, that have been there before me? And I really do, I really struggle to have that. So also just in terms of my work, that's also something that I'm really trying to do, is go, where are we? Where are the female, in my realm, where are the female choreographers? Where are the black women making work and talking about and bringing, you know, creating an arena and a space for something where we have a connection. So for me, in terms of art, in terms of dance, it saved me. I think if I didn't have that, especially with my own, you know, personal situations that were going with me, I don't know where I would be, because law definitely wasn't the thing for me. So yeah, I'll stop there. Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon everyone. My name is Bola Agbaje. I'm a playwright and a screenwriter. So my journey began because, like most writers or directors, we started our journeys wanting to be actors, and then, like most people have said, you know, the idea of not being able to see yourself in something was what prompted me to go, okay, well, I don't want to be an actor, I want to be the one to create the work for myself. So originally my journey started with me saying I want to write something for myself and put it on. But somewhere along the line, I kind of lost that passion for acting and kind of found the passion for writing. And so my journey was just about I wanted to I have the thing about identity and figuring out who you are. You know, my parents are Nigerian. I grew up here, but I lived in Nigeria when I was a kid. So I had this kind of battle with my identity for quite a while growing up in South London, because when I came, I grew up in Hastings as a kid, and you know, I was like one of the only black kids in Hastings. And then I grew up in Peckham, where I was amongst many black people. And then I went to Africa, where there's loads of black people, but then I was told I was English. And then I came back to England with an African accent, and then I was told, no, you're not English, you're African. So growing up, I had quite a lot of issues in terms of trying to figure out my identity or what I related to and who I was. And it took me a couple of years to kind of go, actually, it's okay to be this multitude of personalities, and it's okay to be African and British and black and Nigerian and all of these different makeups. And so for me, my writing really is about identity and creating characters that have all these different identities and saying that it's okay for people to be three-dimensional. What we find sometimes, I guess, with black characters is that you see a two-dimensional black character on screen, and we get frustrated because that one character has to represent the whole black race. And as you know, we're like, you're looking around the room now, and it's not even just black race, women of colour, we're all different shades, we're all different heights, we're all different makeups, but however, you see someone on TV and that's meant to represent you. And the problem sometimes we as an audience is that we complain when we go, oh, well, I can't identify with that person because she's light-skinned or because she's dark-skinned, so I can't identify with that because that's not me. And so for me, when I create characters, it really is about going, it is okay for you to see that character as a possible mirror, but not to say that that character speaks for everybody. It's just one person's story. And for me, I only try to create stories that just, if you can relate to it, fine. It's like with music, you know, we relate to music because we see ourselves within the story in which an artist is telling, but we don't necessarily go, oh wow, Beyonce's talking about my life at 2 a.m. because I gave her the story. You know, we identify with the mirror of the story of what she's telling us. And I think that for me, my thing about film and TV and plays is that I try to create stories in which people can identify with, but not to say that this is every black person's story or this is every woman's story. So my journey's taken me, I started off writing plays, and then I recently started writing films. I adapted one of my plays, Gone Too Far, into a film, which is going to be out soon in the summer. And I'm now on a BAFTA's bursary course with 4 other writers. So there's 5 writers that they chose around the country to do a bursary, and I'm the only black person there. At first I felt a little bit like, okay, well, a lot of the times I am one of the only black people in the room when it comes to courses, when it comes to playwriting and things like that sometimes. And sometimes I see it as, okay, well, obviously I'm here because I'm the token. But then at the same time, I sometimes go back and I'm like, well, actually, I'm here because I need to be here. And I'm here because actually I've got stories that I need to tell, and there are stories that people can relate to. So I start the bursary tomorrow, and what's great about it is that actually you know, I'm in this establishment that's predominantly male. So not even just to talk about females, black females, white females, in general, writing is a predominantly male career. So to be part of 5 writers who are now working with top writers who've written amazing films like Gladiator and Mandela and all these different Hollywood films that are amazing, and to be selected and chosen as one of the people who will eventually write a screenplay that will be taken to Hollywood to sell as part of it is something that I sometimes sit back and go, well, actually, you know what, it's okay to be a black woman who's also a writer, but also it's okay for me to be in this room with everybody else. And I think sometimes as women of colour, we sometimes feel like we complain about the fact that we're not represented, but then at the same time, we're not too sure when we are in the room whether we should be in the room. Mm-hmm. And so for me, I'm like, well, actually, like a lot of us, what you've said is that we have to own the fact that we are here. Like, we're sitting here now, and I'm sure it's not just the women on the panel. I know a few women who are in the audience who I know are great women who are doing great stuff in their field of work, and I just feel like we should celebrate that more. So it's great that, you know, you're putting this on, because we are celebrating one another, and we need to continue to celebrate one another. So for me, body image is about accepting that we are all unique and we are all different, and at the same time just continue to celebrate it. So,
I think I have the hardest job here because they pretty much said all the amazing things. I mean, okay. I think I truly resonate with everyone's opinion, everyone here as well. So much of who we are and how we portray the image. And through art, it's a way to empower yourself. And when we think about art, we often think about it have to be writing, painting, sculpture, or any other form. Actually, it doesn't. I work with a group of factory girls. They literally work in Chinese factory girls, making clothes you wear, bags you wear. 1 in 4 man-made stuffs in the world, planet, one of them will be Chinese. So if you own 4 things on you, something is made by the girls. None of them had ever formal trainings, yet they produce art, very powerful art, through performance. How we can perform, we can always perform by the way we stand, by the way we talk. So this is how we empower ourselves. Like we said, we find this identity that can be diverse, multi-layered, and celebrate that by empower yourself and doing that, show that through yourselves, and never let anybody to put you into culture and social perception that you should behave or act in certain ways. I think this is a way, for me, very important through my art. And for this particular lovely event, I choose the Factory Girls as exhibition, because I just working with them, taking them to studios and working with a performance where they get makeup and then they stand in different ways, where they feel empowered when they want to be boss of the factory they're working, or they become a singer. They all have amazing dreams. And I wanted to give them the opportunity not to be in the factory girls, being on the assembly lines like robots, but literally who they can be, right? So they so amazingly empowered, and I get them to take off their makeups, reversing them back to the factory girls they are now. So this is the power we gave it to them, and to ask them, it's not permanent. You have to do something to make that possible. So art is so much how we made all these amazing topics. How do we visualize as them? I'm so hoping by the end of this, we're all going away feeling inspired and be able to express ourselves better. And I think the society can be changed, even with the factory girls. The reason I started is because there's so many cliches about factory girls, impoverished and treated badly, but we never hear the voice from them. So much about who they are, and we don't hear about what they do after work. How do they spend time? Do they ever find a boyfriend? Do they ever go out for a meal? Do we ever entertain, or rather just be a slave on the assembly line? So all of this is questions that we raise for the society. We raise the issue, and then we invite people of all colors, all history, all background to go and into things we're passionate and to find out more about it. This is the whole thing of breaking up the social and culture cliche of who they think we are in our different ways. So I honestly, every year, I work with 10 or 20 of these girls, giving them something, and then every year until 2020, when China's economy is supposed to take over America. Let's see. But what's really important is how these girls go to grab what they have, the power, that they're able to make China's economy a miracle. So how are they going to use the power they have now to change their social status in China? I mean, the reason I'm talking that is actually, even we think about this, it's the same as we're doing now here, isn't it? It's exactly the same thing, because we actually sitting here thinking how we can empower ourselves and changing how the other people view ourselves. Culture and art is so transit, and that's the power of it. I just want to leave this with hoping everyone, when you stand there, even waiting for a bus or getting your shoppings, but in the way that you hold your own dignity and your whole personality, and nobody in the world can bring you down. Thank you.
I'm sure you're aware that we're in the presence of some really incredible women. They've, coming across their work has been really, really inspiring, and one to celebrate. But I mean, you've all kind of, particularly you, Vicki and Bola, you've brought up the kind of struggle. You guys are reaching a certain place in your career, and you're carrying on, you're building, you're developing, you're doing incredible things. But that has been a process and a journey. And I think this is just from a really selfish point of view as an artist. I mean, my parents expected me to be a lawyer. I ended up doing politics. My dad was still telling people I'd done law, and then I completely gone off, tried to explain it. Even last night after the launch, he's not in the country. My mum told him about it, and he's in finance, corporate man. Sends me a message this morning. He goes, "Heard the launch went great. So what's next? What are the deliverables?" I have not responded to that. But I would really love to kind of hear how you have maintained that commitment, the kind of barriers you've come up, and how you've coped and kind of overcome those things to push through with your work, because I know some of us in here are struggling artists, we're all struggling. But yeah, so do you want to start, Vicky, on that one? And then feel free to throw in.
I think, just speaking freely, you never want to be seen as the person that's got a chip on your shoulder. But at the same time, you know that there are barriers, maybe because of your gender or because of, the colour of your skin or the texture of your hair, even. A week ago, I was sporting braids, and I was at a friend's house watching Black Girls Rock and decided I'd stopped relaxing my hair 2 years previously. When I go home, I was at my friend's house, when I go home, I'm taking these braids out, I only had them in 2 weeks, and I'm embracing my natural. So there's always those barriers there. And for me, I've found, up until now, I have been conforming, and thinking that I wasn't. And for me, the kind of next step, in terms of my image and what I was looking at, the hair for me was a massive, massive thing. And I've just realised I'm at a place now where I'm not afraid to speak up. I'm not afraid to say, I am black, I am a woman, I am African, but I also am a choreographer, and I want you to see my work for the work and not because it's a black woman making the work. Yes, my culture and my influences will seep through that, it's natural. Just as if someone who was white or Spanish or a disabled artist was making work. But I think I've really struggled with just being fierce to say this is what it is, for fear of, well, she's got a chip on her shoulder, but that they're intertwined. And you spoke about the whole thing of the being the token person, and I'm really happy in terms of you, because I nearly said it and then you already said it, so I'm like, step back, Vicky, step back, but of also actually knowing your self-worth and going, okay, I might be the only black person there, but that doesn't necessarily mean I'm the token. I am here because of the work that I'm doing. And I think once we can also start to change our mindset with that, you then start celebrating your achievements. Because actually the only way to change it is for us to be in those positions, in those rooms, changing the stereotypes and the views of those people that have the power to help us gain the career that we're looking for. In the dance world, for me, there definitely is an imbalance. A very quick story of a friend of mine who is also a choreographer calls a particular studio, which I won't name, and says, "Oh, I'm an artist. I want to come and teach an African dance class at your studio." And they turn around to her and say, "Oh, you know what, that's really great, but we have one African class in the midst of a timetable that delivers something like 150 classes a week, of 4 or 5 of the same type of technique with different teachers, but because you have the one African class, you've hit your quota." So also for me, in terms of my career and trying to just push through those things, I'm in a place now where if I don't do it, who is going to do it? So I can sit and have a moan with my friends and go, but the next day I need to take some sort of action. And I need to also share the ideas, share the love, because I do feel, some people may disagree, but we also do ourselves a disservice. When you are the one, you don't want to share, because you go, it's that mentality of one in, one out. My thing is, if I'm doing what I'm doing, and Hannah is doing what she's doing, and Lesley's doing what she's doing, and Grace is doing what she's doing, that opens up the industry for people to be more excited and interested about the work that females, black women, writers, poets, dancers, designers, whatever, they're doing. So that's something that I employ, and it's embedded in everything that I do. Sharing is caring. I don't want to be the only one at the top. I want to be one of many at the top. So I'll stop there because I could go on forever.
Anybody want to? Yeah, I just wanted to add to that, which was that I definitely agree with the struggle. It's a struggle to do any. Being a creative is a struggle in itself, because you're going against the grain. You're doing, people used to you. People doing a 9-to-5 job. The fact that you can't even put your work into those 8 hours a day kind of measures makes it difficult. Like, even my parents, sometimes I work from home, so I write at home, and my mum will sometimes call me and be like, okay, can you go and do something, and I'll be like, Mum, I'm working, and she's like, but you're at home, and I'm like, yes, I am working. And like, the idea of the fact that you're working from home and that it just doesn't occur to people. And also the struggle of being, like, I used to work full-time as well as be a writer, so financially I was okay because I had a monthly paycheck. But then once my work increased, I then had to quit my job and focus on writing. And that was the hardest year of my life, because trying to, people don't measure, they measure our work by the love that we put into it and the passion we have for it. So a lot of the times you get people who say, oh, well, this is going to help you, it's going to elevate you, and so we don't have enough money to pay you, but, we know that this is going to push you and put you on the next platform. And majority of the time, you're going to say yes, because it does put you on the next platform. But then at the same time, once you do things for free, you start to realise that all I'm doing is doing this work for free, and I need to eat, and I need to get paid, and I need to survive. You can't say to your mortgage company, oh, well, sorry, I didn't get paid today, but in 3 months' time, I'm going to get a big paycheck, I'll sort you out there. Like, it just doesn't work. So the struggle is that you have to try and, you have to push past those kind of financial constraints and focus on the things you love and keep going, and hope one day that eventually you get that financial reward. But at the same time, I think that what's great about, what keeps me going is the love for it. And I'm sure that that's the same with every artist, which is the fact that that eventually, like, you're doing something you love. You're not in a job that you hate. Sometimes it's a struggle for me to write. When I'm writing, I do get bored. I do, with social media, I get distracted by Facebook, Twitter, everything. But at the same time, when I get engrossed in my work, and once I start writing and I get into that world, I start to realise why I love doing what I do. When I create characters, I find this joy and this love that I've never found anywhere else. And it gives me a comfort, because I'm able to create worlds that don't exist, but I'm making them exist and making people believe that they exist. I make a make-believe world and people buy into that. And so for me, that is what pushes me forward and keeps me going each time. And yes, we constantly fall down, but the thing is, you just have to get back up and keep going. And that's the only advice that I'd give to people, is just that, if you have a love for it, just keep doing it.
Whenever I face with hard times, I think spiritually we're never going to be break down. We just think, okay, it's a struggle, and I accept it. I'll make a sacrifice at the other part of my life, but I just remember what is so important to me and the message or whatever I want to deliver, and I keep on going that. I think it's about consistency. Once you have that, you will carry on. Second thing I want to mention is about diversity. So it diversifies. I mean, I'm literally artist, but I'm also social commentator for banks, for investment banks, and I give consultant things on lots of media company try to go to China. I use that as a way to fund my own thing, so I have more of a liberty So you see, I diversify, and I would find there's not a problem. I will have to do part, because somehow it becomes part of your research, part of your human encounter, your experience. This is all carried into your work. So don't worry about the fact struggles, and realize everyone around you have somewhere struggle in life. Yeah. Okay.
I think I've said most of it. But I'm just going to add a little bit, which is about, it's going to sound a bit cliche, but actually is about believing in yourself and yourself as an artist and taking yourself seriously. Because up until recently, my dad, I also had the same thing where, you know, my parents wanted, and I did actually study pharmacy and then became a research scientist. So I did something completely different for quite a while. And I spent a long time resenting that they'd kind of forced me to do this thing when I'd actually really done it because I was good at it and I enjoyed it at the time. And then I had to make a choice. I was like, either be a scientist or a writer, and I chose to be a writer. But it took me a long time to take myself seriously and say I'm a writer and make time and make sacrifices for that. And my dad, you know, when I had my first play put on, my dad said to me, but this is a hobby, isn't it? And I was like, no, Dad. Like, can you see, this is like sweat. I am working my arse off to make this happen. And I'm sacrificing everything I can to make it happen. And you're calling it a hobby. Now he takes me a bit more seriously, but secretly I know they just want me to go back and become like an academic. And I have had to do that. I have had to make that space for myself and with my friends and everyone, and actually say to people, I am a writer. And until I started to do that myself, I didn't think anyone else was going to take me seriously. So that would be in addition to what everyone else has said. And I think you always struggle, and your struggle is what makes your art what it is. Because otherwise, I think it would be pretty boring actually.
I'm going to just ask one more question before we open it out to the audience, because I think you've touched on a lot of things I had already kind of wanted to ask, which is great. One of the things you guys have also all mentioned is about creating a vocabulary through your practice, a vocabulary for you and yourself and your journey, and how that vocabulary changes also over time, depending on that. But also when you create art and you create it publicly, because obviously, as you've mentioned, Sharmila, you still do things that are for yourself as an artist, but you create publicly. How has that response to your work been? How does that affect what you kind of create and the conversations that begins or ends? Who wants to? Alan?
Actually, you lost me a little bit.
Okay, sorry. I want to know that how other people perceive your work. How does that affect what you create? Because obviously you start a conversation, but that's not the end of the conversation. When you create publicly, you're also creating for an audience. So,
yeah. I think for the vocabulary, the way I practice my art is every time I have a project, I'm looking for what is really important, social issues and cultural issues. And then I would decide what would be the best way to actually use it, right? It's painting, photography, sculpture, installation, or community work. I try not to stay at one particular practice because I think it's good to not stay in your comfort zone all the time, but jumped out of it. So if you just did one practice, sometimes it's good to do something different. Remember, there's not a thing as a perfect art. What is the art that really, really inspirational? Are the art that is stimulating, that always changing, and always trying new things. And that's what I think is the part of the art I want to practice. Another thing is how I reflect art. The funny thing I think is a bit culture is actually I started to do a little bit performance simultaneously in China, in Britain. When I did in Britain, the people passes, very few will stay over. I think we all done this before. I done it. Some artists doing things. I feel like, oh, it's so interesting, but I can't look. I don't want to be looking weird, so I pass quickly. Sometimes you stay, but you think, have I stayed too long? People think I'm weird. I'm gonna go, yeah? So this is actually, I'm sure we all have a little bit of that. But then I did it in China, and what happened in China? I actually did a project that was on the coldest day of that year. I did about 5 hours because it's a part installation, painting, and everything together. So I have to do it on site, which is on the building site in China. And what's funny is that people completely stopped. For 5 hours, people stay with me, asking me, is this art? Is that art? Is this Western art? We don't do this in China. You know, this is not in Beijing or Shanghai. This is in my hometown, which is a little medium-sized Chinatown city where people do paint peonies all day and calligraphy. So I was thinking, I could never believe these people. I was working and suddenly so, hey, is this art? So tell me a bit more. Is this, oh, this is West. Oh, is this how the West are doing things? It's very different. Then I realized, that was the moment I realized art is to communicate. It gave me such a way to communicate with the others. I cannot believe it. My ladies, I got supporters. So I was so happy. And then I found that was the core of my art is to deliver messages, the subtle things you don't have to speak. Because so much about art with the visual art is you don't talk. I mean, sorry I talk so much. But you don't talk when you do art, and then you let the art speak, and you really push people to think and to collaborate. And people start, and afterwards, after I left, people were queuing, try to see the art. We have to put a line on there, please queue. And then what happened the next day, because it's a sculpture, I saw people would take away the fabrics. You know, being Chinese, we're very practical. We take the fabric, we take the wood, you know. So I saw, but I got painting inside as well. So I saw, but the next day when I went, all the structure was in the wind blowing away, but people took the painting, exactly what I wanted. Can you imagine? And that's so powerful. I think that on that day, I changed so many people's views on lives, on art, and hopefully that was answering question. I think that's how I built up the vocabulary, like gradually through every time you do a new piece, they will build up something new, something you encounter will really enrich your life. So that's
for me, in terms of my vocabulary, it was definitely a journey, because before I found the house, working the Vogue, and fused that with the African and contemporary, when I was performing, I was working with popping and locking and trying to be a B-girl, and I was really doing those styles because I was a dancer and I was being choreographed on. When I found house, especially, that was the first one that came into my sphere. I remember I was in a club in the West End, and there were a group of Korean dancers doing house. They were in a cypher, in a circle, and I jumped in, tried to do a few moves, and realised I didn't know what I was doing. Spoke to one of them, what is this style, house? Went home that night and was on YouTube for hours just investigating this style. And what really, why I connected with the style, because it gave me a freedom. And I think up until then, in terms of the styles I was working with, there wasn't really that spiritual connection. And through finding house, I then found the whacking and the Vogue. And with the whacking and the Vogue, for me, I could be a woman dancing, but be elegant, be strong, and be classy. And that was, it had such a massive impact for me, because actually with those two styles, they are styles that are given to us by gay men in LA. But I didn't need to be a hoochie mama doing what I was doing. I could be classy. So for me, it was really empowering. And once I had those styles, I then just spent a long time, and Grace can testify to this. She used to dance with the company, and then she said, Vicky, I'm done with your crazy movement. Just investigating the different ways that I could put that on my body, but also the dancers as well. And part of...
No, carry on, and I'll throw in a question.
Okay, and part of, you know, sometimes when people ask me to explain the style or what it is, I say it's a free up. It's just live your life. If that's the movement that you want to do, get involved, get into it. And that's something that I take through in terms of my work. So the last piece that I did premiered at Sadler's Wells Lillian Bayliss last year in September. And it was a piece called Our Mighty Groove. And it was about me sharing my experience, my first experience of going to an underground New York house club, being baptized on the dance floor. Because when I went in, I had my back up against the wall. You see all these divas just twirling and doing their thing. And I was like, oh my gosh, I want to get involved, but I don't know what I'm doing. And this gentleman came over. You know when they like lock eyes with you and you're like, oh no, don't look at me. I can't, stop. And he made a beeline for me and was pulling me into the cypher, into the circle where all the dancers were dancing. And I was like, I am going to make an ass of him. I don't know what I'm doing. So he pulled me in and I started doing a few house moves. I think I did 4 moves and just looped them. I was like, this is what I know. Just loop them. Just loop them. Just loop. Just keep, yeah. But the love that I received from these dancers, it was as if I was spinning on my head. And it was something that actually in London, especially in like the dance world, commercial, but also the underground world, it's only now starting to happen. So also there for me, it was the whole thing of the culture and that around it. So when I made this piece, Our Mighty Groove, it was really about sharing my experience of that. And it was an interactive piece. So the pieces I'd made up until that point would be, you guys are the audience, the dancers are on stage, you sit and you watch it, and then afterwards there's a discussion and a debate. What I did with Sadler's Wells Lillian Bayliss is we got rid of the seating and we recreated a club. So when people came in, it was an open space. The dancers weren't identified to the audience as the dancers. So the music started and the piece just unfolded. You were outside, we had our twirling bouncers taking your tickets and coming in. So we really just changed the atmosphere. And it touched me because I made that piece for myself, but also for the people, in the sense that I knew that my story and something in there would touch the audience. And the thing that I was also really trying to get is this interactive feel. So in terms of placing it, so actually you could be a performer and I'm an audience member and you're grooving so much, I'm getting involved. And that was happening. So there were moments where we had the audience becoming the performer and actually giving some of the dancers a run for their money, and I loved that. So for me now, in terms of moving forward, there is this interactive feel that I don't just want people to sit. If in the middle of the piece you want to get up and do it, be fierce, be fabulous.
If you have something to say it.
I'm just going to add something just about what you said about being reviewed and or how an audience's reaction would reflect on my own practice. I think what I've become really aware of is the fact that the gaze, so when people are talking about work, nothing is clearer than the perspective that they're coming from in what they say. And so I had like a PhD student come to see a play in Plymouth, all the way from Exeter, and he wrote this massive long piece about it, absolutely got it, absolutely understood what I was trying to say. And because he understood the truth of what I was trying to say, it really touched me. And I just was like, wow, someone actually really got it. And then you might get a broadsheet paper reviewing your work, and it's a cultural or a aesthetic. When someone's assessing your work, it's a point of view anyway. You can't sort of say, oh, that's right or that's wrong. It's so subjective. But I try to filter what comes back to me and try and make it a safe space so I can continue doing what I'm doing, and always try to think, who am I writing this for? Because it's so easy, we are so conditioned. Every day we step out of our house, even when we're in our house, we're constantly aware of the system that we live in. And so I try to consciously, with my work, think, this is the only place I can be free and be true to what I'm saying. And so try and make work for, I would say, my community. I mean that very loosely, but I mean I try to make work that is true, and that's the only guiding light that I have, and it's the only reason that I do what I do. And without that, I think it would be a mockery and it would be a waste of time. So that's, yeah.
No, just, I'm sorry, everyone else has said more or less like what.
So we're going to open it up for questions. We have 10 minutes, and then we want to give you a chance to kind of have a look at the work, have some food, because we've got some food, patties, chicken wings, some other faux canapes that are actually ackee and saltfish. Yes, so we want to give you a chance of that. So does anybody have, I think we'll be able to hear quite easily in here, or will we need a mic?
Sorry?
Do you think we'll need a mic? I think we'll speak loudly enough.
No, yeah, they speak loudly.
Yeah? Does anybody have any questions? I'm looking at you. You look like you might have a question.
I could answer.
Yeah.
Hamlet, please. So I work in a kind of contemporary art gallery, and there's a lot of, we work with people like Gary Human, Tracy Emin, those kind of like young British artists who've got big names themselves. And I notice within their work, or the way they talk about their work, and that's not just something that's like a lot of even young contemporary artists that I see in like people coming out of BAs now, that they have like a real distancing themselves from politics and from any kind of like social commentary. And I had this like lasting conversation with a young playwright who is white and is male, and it sort of stuck with me because my friend and I were trying to push him to say why would he not try to have like a feminist message in his work if he believed in feminism. And he was saying, but I'm true to my art, I have to be true to my art, and so as such politics, if it comes out of the characters I create, that's a natural thing, but it's not, I'm not going to write politics into it directly. And I made the connection and thought, well, it's easy for him to say that because he's in the position of the most privilege, and it's like, if you're in a position that you think, if you're like a white male, then you're going to think that you've got the neutral voice. You're not actually going to see that you've got a political voice as well, and you're coming from a certain point. So I wonder, as someone who's about to start an art foundation and sort of take a bit of a career dive, how can you be like a political artist and not be spoken about in that sort of niche? Because I think if you've seen that social inequality, you can't ignore it, and you have to kind of write that into your work. So how can it not be like a cool thing anymore?
I just think people lie. Like, the honest truth of the matter is, as much, because it's the easiest answer to have, is that if someone says, like, I, even as a writer, I know that there's times when people are like, is this piece political? And like I'm like, no, it's not. But I'm writing these characters. I am putting the words in their mouths. And it isn't always my views or the things that I want to say about society, but the truth of the matter is everything's politics. You know, so we're talking about politics every day of our lives when we complain about you know, air pollution or the fact that we have to wake up early in the morning to go to a job that we may not like. We're talking about politics all the time. So it's going to be informed in your work. I think it's an easy excuse to say that I refrain from talking about politics because also we live in such a society that we don't want to offend people, and in particular, as your friend was saying, as he's a white male, the majority of the time is that he is going to be viewed as someone who is, if he does have a viewpoint or if he's writing for women, people will say that, well, what does he know? He's a man. How can he write confidently about a woman and do it in a way that will be representative of all women? So a lot of the times we hide away or shy away from the fact that we are talking in a political way. But the fact is that we are artists and we want to put a mirror up to the society to reflect the things that we see. So we are talking in political terms. So I just think that, you know, the thing you have, someone said it here earlier, which is that you have to be truthful to the things you want to do and to the art that you want to create. And once you are truthful to that, then people are going to interpret it in different ways. But as long as you are truthful, your art will stand the test of time and it will work. So yeah, I guess that's my answer to it.
Aowen, do you want to throw in something? Because I feel you straddle that.
Yes, I'm so glad you mentioned this, because being a visual artist, I constantly have this battle with everyone around me. Every time I do anything for the media, the first thing before the journalist is going to ask me if anything is, what's your political stand? And I think I don't know about the West, but in China, what happened is for me, I find it's very easy if I say, okay, I'm either pro-China or anti-China. It's very easy to be manipulated by media, whether the Chinese media or Western media, into different things and become an activist, where I'm just a pure artist. I think that's the first thing. Second thing, I do believe that art should serve a purpose. I think the last century was about what is art, right? And by the end, we all decided anything can be art, right? After Duchamp had his toilet seat, well, honestly, I was a graduate from Goldsmiths. We once had a student, I don't know whether I can talk on telly. Oh, sorry. No. This lady. We only had like a discussion rooms, right? So we all said like seminar every week. You have to progress. So you have your work put in. We had one lady came here, made a dump, painted gold and left. And then we all smelled. Okay. So everything can be art. So there's so much. So now, so sorry about this, but I think people should hear it, because so now, really, what is the purpose? When everything is art, then the purpose is lost. So then, because there's no meaning after all, but there is, because like us. Like everybody really, we all feel somehow we're misrepresented. I mean, even the white male can come along and say, I feel misrepresented, right? So we all had this power to use art to change that concept. I do think his artists have the power and the privilege to really, like someone said, to appreciate life around you and really to question of the perception of the world around us. And that is really powerful, and we have this opportunity. So why not use it? So I truly believe why it's if you believe in the vision, and then you just have to be brave enough to say it and take other people's criticism, because that's what life is about. You can't be perfect and rounded just that way. So we have to be brave. Yeah, that's it.
I would love to ask a question about this idea of being the token, or being the one black woman in this space. I mean, I'm an academic, and I think the sort of intellectual production that I'm engaging in is my form of art, and I often find that I am in spaces where I am the one woman of color, let alone like woman of African, Caribbean ancestry in a space, and often people blackness and everyone like turns and looks to me to be the person that speaks for that, and yet, as I negotiate that, on the one hand, it's like I want to own that and be able to like talk about that and talk about being a black woman and talk about living in that world, and yet I don't want to be the only person to speak on that at the same time. So I want to like have you all say a little bit more about how you negotiate that being a token, because on the one hand, it's a part of my lived experience, and I'm imagining it's a part of your lived experience, and you want to carve out that space, and yet you want to reject being that token at the same time. So if you could speak a little bit more about how you both embrace that and yet contest that at the same time.
For me, my thing was, I remember once being asked by a white actor who said to me, why don't you ever write white characters? Now, the truth of the matter is, I actually do. I have written white characters in my pieces and in my plays. However, they've not been the lead character. And at first, I was, and then his other comment was that, you know, if you wrote a story that was predominantly about white people, then that would elevate you to a different level, because at the moment you're writing black plays for black people and the black community. So if you now took that and created and made it all about white characters, then you would be seen on a different level. And my answer to that was, well, wait, until everybody else is writing black characters that I don't feel the need to write black characters, then I will stop. But until then, I still feel there is a need for me to write black characters that people can relate to and be proud of and own. So I saw it as a thing of, I'm not trying to fit into that box and be like every other writer and go, oh, well, where I want to be is that I want people to forget that I'm black. I don't want people to forget that I'm black, because I am. You know, the thing about it is, it's only when you're in the Western society that you are constantly reminded of your blackness. I went to Nigeria recently, and one of my plays is about a politician who goes back home to rest, but he ends up getting into politics in Africa, in Nigeria. And one of the lines that reflected in me, that the character says, is that the reason why he got into politics in Africa, regardless of the fact that it's dangerous, is because of the fact that he is not reminded that he is black. Like, that is the biggest thing for him, is the fact that, and that's the biggest thing for me without realizing it, is the fact that when I did go back, it was that being black wasn't my issue. My accent was an issue, but being black wasn't an issue because everybody else was black. And I felt that here, as a writer, I'm constantly called a black writer. Whereas when I went to Nigeria, I was never, the word black didn't come into the fact that I was a writer. It was the fact that I was a writer, and that was it. And so it's that double-edged sword. You own it, and then you reject it, and you own it, and you reject it. And it really just depends on what day I wake, how I wake up on the day. Depends on whether or not, you know, I fight against it or fight with it. But the main thing for me is that I am black, and I want to celebrate the fact that I am black. So majority of the time, my stance is that, yeah, okay, I do want to do black work, because not that no one else is doing it. There are so many other black playwrights out there who are doing great work. But it's the fact that I just feel like, you know, like we've all discussed, there is still, we're not reflected well enough in the media yet. And until we are, then I can turn around and be like, okay, well, I'm going to write about aliens now because no one else is doing it. Do you know what I mean? Like, that will be my new thing to kind of put me out of a different box. But until then, that's what I'll continue to do, I guess.
I think I wholeheartedly agree, it's the same thing for me. The other thing that I can add to what Bola's already said is this thing about networking. And like I said, I don't want to be the only one. I want to be one of many. So even small things, you know, events are happening, passing that information on. I mentor, you know, younger dancers, artists that are coming up. I mean, I've got dancers that are coming out of high prestigious dance conservatoires, which are mainly white orientated, and coming out now with real issues about themselves and their identity and their body image, because they're putting themselves up against their, you know, their white peers and feeling, you know, second rate. So I think there is also something around how we network and make sure that you know, I'm not the only black woman that's going to be there, but I tell a friend who's hopefully going to tell a friend who is going to tell a friend, so that there are more of us there. Sometimes if I go to things and I am the only one, and that does happen, I go, I'm only human. I can't speak for every black person. And I think there's also no shame in saying that, and almost, you know, throwing that back to the people that you're in the room with, because we can't, you know, we can represent each other, but it's a tall order for you to be put in a room and feel like you have to speak for every black person or every black woman. No. But my thing is just growing the numbers, getting the equality back. And it's that thing of, you know, exactly what you're saying. You know, even in the dance world, we have organisations that are specifically targeted for black and ethnic minority artists. I hope one day we do all of those companies out of their jobs, that we don't need that. Because actually when you go for funding, you're not just having to tick the black box to get that, but you're being judged on your work. And it's not going, well, we need to have one, so we get 6 black artists that apply, so we'll take that one so we've filled our quota, and then we'll have everything else. But actually you put all of those artists on the table and go, these are the ones that are producing the best work. And if 4 of them end up being, you know, being black, then so be it. But I feel, you know, you have to be a champion, but you also have to be human as well. So I've done that. I've just gone, well, I can say my piece, but please don't think that I'm speaking for every single black person in the world, because I can't. We're all different. But hopefully, I feel like one day we just won't be having these discussions, because actually it's just truly equal. One day, I may not be around when that happens, but...
Can I just say, I feel, again, sorry, I'm always very opinionated. I'm sure we'll find out. Well, with this, I wanted to congratulate all the ladies for their achievement. I think everyone had this struggle when you suddenly feel, oh, I'm in the right place, I'm the only one singled out. And you feel awkward, you feel you're almost taking other people's opportunities away. But then think positively, because you can only think positively. Right? What's negativity is going to get to nothing. I don't think we should stop speaking out for who we are. Because if other people come around, do you know, I get constantly people ask, so that's what you do in China, blah, blah, blah. And then it is a great opportunity for us to tell them more about your culture. Without talking, without speaking, without expressing through us, we never get that. So it is not a negative thing if someone asks you. They only ask you, I'm sure someone will ask you, oh, how is whatever the country or whatever we come from. It doesn't mean we are authority. They just ask you your experience. And through our sharing our own experience, like my artworks, it's all about the girls sharing their life stories. And then we can understand more. So don't be afraid to speak out. Even some people, I get asked so much about China, about Asia, right? Typical things. And every time I embrace with enthusiasm, because at least it's somewhat interesting in your culture to start with. So don't black it out, and then just give your concept and have a dialogue, because it's all about changing one person at a time. You know, the way I see my art, I think it's a good way to think. So you don't think I'm going to change the world, but if you can just move one person at a time, even you have exhibition that is one person that's moved by it, that's a success. Yeah? So there you go.
Thank you. So I'm going to wrap this up now and give you guys an opportunity to see things, have food, mingle with the artists. I'd like to thank you all for coming today. I'd like to thank our fabulous panel and celebrate the work that they do. So let's give them a round of applause.